This episode of the Sara Carter Podcast is brought to you by the Tunnel to Towers Foundation. On 9/11, we vowed to never forget. Help America keep that promise. Donate $11 a month to the Tunnel to Towers Foundation at t2t.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org.
Hey, today's podcast is sponsored by the Association of Mature American Citizens. It is the fastest growing conservative 50-plus organization in America. Join today at amac.us/Carter. So we've got Senator Marsha Blackburn on the show today, and she's going to go over her whole trip to the border, that eye-opening trip that people take when they get down to McAllen, Texas, there along the Rio Grande River in Mexico, and realize we have absolutely ceded our control of the border to the drug cartels and human traffickers. That basically the Biden administration has just totally flipped things on their head, that our law enforcement officials, as well as our our Border Patrol agents and our National Guard are out there on their own, trying to do a job that they are incapable of doing, that they were trained and taught to do, but incapable of doing because the administration has their hands tied behind their back. We're going to ask Marsha Blackburn, the senator, all about her trip, what she saw, what she believes needs to be done, and how do we rectify this. And boy, does she have some information for us, stuff that literally is new to me and surprising. You do not want to miss that interview. I also want to talk to you a little bit about what's happening in Afghanistan. I know that's not at the top of the news list for everyone anymore, though it should be. Because believe me, those terrorists that are running that nation right now, the Taliban, along with Al-Qaeda and ISIS, do have plans for the United States and the Western world. Trust me. Trust me, these extremists are very well focused on us. While we might not be even paying attention to them, all they're doing is sitting day after day after day planning on how they will strike the West again. That is what they want to do. That is their intention. They have told us that. Right now, though, in Afghanistan, the situation is so dire that reports are coming out that once again, parents in the most poverty-stricken areas are being forced to sell their children again. And I'm telling you forced because there are a lot of parents that do not want to sell their children, but they are literally being strong-armed by the Taliban into doing so. And we're going to go into that a little bit. You can't even imagine what life is like in that part of the world unless you see it for yourself. And I've actually been there, and I've actually seen what happens to some of these children. By the way, some of these children are sold, and they were sold to madrasas in the past where they were trained to become suicide bombers. Their parents did not know this, but they were being used like sheep in some kind of horror novel to be trained to target our Western assets, as well as our soldiers and our service members serving overseas in that region, and as well as, the Pakistan government and other areas of that. And I'll explain how that works. Look, before we get any further, let's all go online. Let's go to SaraACarter.com. Go to SaraACarter.com. And while you're there, please sign up for my email list. It is such an important email list. It allows us over at SaraACarter.com and everyone I work with to stay in touch with you. We get the stories that you need to read out to you, our podcast. By the way, wherever you get your podcast, download the Sara Carter Podcast Show. Go ahead and download it at Apple, Spotify, wherever. When you do that, it helps me help you. I can continue to bring all the great people that join me on the podcast to you, whether that's Senator Marsha Blackburn or Lou Elizondo and the latest on what's happening with UFOs, or special guests that I bring on the show from the border with the latest in all of the intelligence community and what's happening here in the United States. We can get it to you here at SaraACarter.com and bring it directly to you. Download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts, folks. You can also get great discounts at MyPillow products. If you go to mypillow.com right now and click on the radio listeners specials, you can get those great discounts, deep discounts on MyPillow mattress toppers, towels, and so much more. They also have MyPillow slippers. They're awesome. They're so comfy and soft. They have dog beds that my dogs love, and even high quality weight blankets. Buy one, get one free offer on all Giza Dream Sheets, guys. Listen to this. Buy one, get one free offer on all Giza Dream Sheets. You do not want to miss that. All MyPillow products come with a 60-day money-back guarantee and a 10-year warranty. Go to mypillow.com and click on the radio listener specials for the buy one, get one free offer on Giza Dream Sheets. Enter the promo code, though, Carter, Carter, or call 1-800-685-7221. That is 1-800-685-7221 for great MyPillow specials. That's 1-800-685-7221. Be sure to use the promo code Carter at checkout. Thanks. And get your favorite Giza Dream Sheets today. You won't regret it. Folks, I want to start talking about what's happening in Afghanistan. We were so blessed to be able to get my interpreter who worked with me, and I'm very close to his family, out of Afghanistan along with his newborn baby and his wife. But there were so many other people left behind, so many people that had green cards, people who had served with the U.S. military, American citizens. I mean, it was absolute insanity what the administration did, and how they treated our service members and those who served is beyond comprehension to me. I still can't get over it. I know how much it broke my husband's heart to watch what was happening there, as well as other service members. It wasn't because it was the end of the war. Nobody wanted to, this never-ending war. But what we did want was to establish a place where we could be secure, right? Keep like some presence alive that would tell the terrorists, tell the Taliban, tell those who are thinking of doing harm to our nation, like they did on September 11th. And by the way, like they did for the last 20 years. Over 20,000 service members wounded in Afghanistan alone, thousands killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and our lives turned upside down. I mean, think about it. Everything we do, from going to the airport to taking a taxi in London, to just walking around in New York City, to how we deal with things on New Year's Eve, and the lockdowns and how we handle ourselves. The world is completely different. I mean, for crying out loud, we're even taking off our shoes still right at the airport, unless you have your TSA, screening pass, and you got to give away all your information to do that. But our lives have been turned upside down, and many of our lives changed permanently. And now it feels like we're going back to a point where we or our children or our grandchildren may be facing something far worse all over again. And all because we just walked away without thinking clearly about Afghanistan. We didn't think about what we did there. We didn't think about how we handled those circumstances, that situation. Al-Qaeda is there in droves. I can tell you there are thousands of Al-Qaeda fighters in Afghanistan. And I'm talking about Arab fighters. I'm not talking about Afghans. I'm not talking about the Afghan Taliban. I'm talking about actual Arab fighters who have infiltrated Afghanistan and have been there for some time, and who have been paying villagers to stay in their village kind of incognito, under wraps. And they're once again building training camps and doing what they need to do because they still have an agenda. And that is to target us. Whether we want to believe it or not, whether we're exhausted of the story or not, they don't care. They don't care about what you're exhausted of. They don't care about what I'm exhausted of. They don't care. These people are planning to target us. That is a fact. Talk to anybody in the intelligence community if you have an opportunity and see what they have to say. They will tell you that. And I'm going to tell you, I'm not reading this story or talking about the story about parents who are selling their children just because it's a heartbreaking story and it's horrible. And we've seen this. We've seen child soldiers in Africa. We've seen what happens in East Asia. We've seen now what happens in South Asia, where Afghanistan is, what happens there, what happens in other parts of the world. I'm telling you this story because some of these children have literally been sold. They have been sold, and in the past, they were sold to become suicide bombers. This is not just about selling my child and, an Afghan woman paying off a debt. A lot of times, and sometimes a child is sold into marriage, is given away. God only knows what happens to these beautiful children, these poor children that have to be, that are treated like cattle, treated like a piece of property that's to be traded. But I was actually in Afghanistan, for many years, and I covered the war there, and I covered the war even from the perspective of Pakistan. And at one point in time, it was 2010, I went into Pakistan. I flew into the FATA, which is the Federal Administered Tribal Belt. It's the lawless region between Afghanistan and Pakistan, mostly run by the Taliban. I went in there with the Pakistani military. And I went to an area village where Batullah Masood, who was killed by our CIA. He was a Taliban leader at the time, where Batullah Masood had actually built suicide bombing schools. He was training children to be suicide bombers, children as young as 7 years old. Many of those children were sold or given up by parents who could no longer take care of them because there is such extreme poverty and life is different there. Life means something different there at times. At times it does. When things are so desperate, when you have nothing, maybe sometimes there's single mothers whose husbands have died and they have no way of taking care of their children because guess what? Women can't work under the Taliban. Women cannot work under the Taliban. And if they don't have a family member that will take them in, if they don't have someone who will take care of them and their children, then they're left alone to be beggars, to live a life in destitute. And some of them hope that maybe by giving their child up, that their child will have a better life. And it usually never worked out that way. In fact, it was so bad sometimes in Afghanistan that some of the girls would literally self-immolate. They had clinics there for that. Some of the girls that were sold to elders or given up in marriage to older men would set themselves on fire with the hope that they would die. But if they wouldn't die, that they would be disfigured enough that the man would no longer want to touch them. So just want you to think about that, what that must be like to live like that. There's a story here. Greg, one of my producers, he actually saw it and he thought it was very interesting, and I did too. It says under the Taliban, families are in debt. Families in debt are selling off their children, which is what I'm warning you about. Once we start seeing this, we start seeing signs of the rise again of this extremist Taliban that will be utilizing some of these children, I truly believe, again, for suicide missions. Here's a story. It's been a little while since we checked in on how things are going in Afghanistan under this quote-unquote kinder, gentler Taliban. This is on Hot Air. While there is still a limited amount of mainstream media coverage coming out of the country and some reporters remain on the ground in safer areas, much of the focus has shifted elsewhere. While I'd love to report that conditions are improving and human rights are slowly reemerging, sadly, pretty much the opposite seems to be the case. Winter is approaching quickly and food is scarce, so that 95% of the citizens there are reportedly undernourished already. Another thing that is missing is money. That likely doesn't apply to the Taliban leaders, of course, but people aren't getting paid much over and across the country. There is almost no cash to be found to pay those who still manage to find work. And now women are selling their children. In this one case, desperate to feed her family, Saleha, a house cleaner in Western Afghanistan, incurred such insurmountable debt that the only way she saw out of it was to hand over her 3-year-old daughter, Najiba, to a man who lent her the money. Basically, she sold her kid for $550 to some man. I can't even imagine. I can't even imagine doing that. I would rather die. But I don't know. I've never been in that situation, right? I've never been in a situation where my whole family is starving, where I have no way out. I don't think I would do that. I've been in Afghanistan. I've talked to people many, many times about the situations there. How could a parent sell their child to, Batullah Masood for a suicide bombing school? And then I found out, well, a lot of times they were lied to. Parents were told that they were going to send their kids to madrasas where they would learn about religion and be better people, and that they would be fed and that they would eventually come back. That did not happen. Those children are taken for other purposes, for nefarious purposes. And I want us to just think about that. When we complain or whatever about our daily lives, or when we're worried about things, there is a reason why people want to come to the United States, folks. And it's because of countries like that all over the world. And thank God we don't have to live under that. I also want to talk a little bit about Nancy Pelosi. Before we get to Senator Marsha Blackburn and what's happening at the border, I just want to throw out that I think Nancy Pelosi gave me one of the best laughs and really a truly wake-up call this past week. Pelosi was really upset that the media, by the way, hasn't done more, listen to this, to sell the reconciliation bill. You got to hear this, folks. It's going to blow your mind.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Our latest CBS News poll shows that only about 10% of Americans describe themselves as knowing a lot of specific things that are in the reconciliation package, and that the majority don't know anything at all. So do you think you need to do a better job at messaging, and going forward, how do you sell this if ultimately you have to?
Well, I think you all could do a better job of selling it, to be very frank with you, because every time I come here, I go through the list. Family medical leave, climate, the issues that are in there.
What the heck is going on with Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats? You know what? They're finally being overt about their relationship with the media. Remember when Julian Assange and WikiLeaks, they basically released all those documents showing that the mainstream media, like people in the Washington Post, people at the New York Times, Politico, and others, were kind of like in Hillary Clinton's pocket, that they were basically chumming it up with them and concocting stories to sell to us, I guess, about how amazing Hillary Clinton was. This is what Nancy Pelosi can't get right now. She's like, oh my gosh, you guys have always been in our pocket. Why aren't you pushing this reconciliation bill? And she just said it openly. Like, nobody cares anymore. Like, that's what the media does. They sell bills. They work with Pelosi. They work with us to get the narrative out there, to sell a bill. Really? I mean, this really is her legacy, though. I mean, people are saying Nancy Pelosi's like getting ready to retire. And, despite my feelings about Pelosi, her ice cream in her freezer, the craziness, I still can't believe that Pelosi and the Democrats get away with what they get away with, considering that Nancy Pelosi lives in San Francisco in a McMansion and her entire city is falling to shit. Like, people literally have to walk over feces. It's literally. And to get to their businesses, and businesses have been shut down, and people are leaving California in droves, and everyone's just sick of it. And she's just running her kingdom, hoping this bill will get through so she can kind of leave that legacy behind. This is an interesting column. It's Paul Kane in the Washington Post. He says, that Nancy Pelosi repeated the phrase publicly Thursday, that it was an accumulation, this massive agenda, this massive bill, this massive reconciliation bill was accumulation of her service in Congress. It was her service in Congress. If she can usher President Biden's ambitious agenda, trillions of dollars, Pelosi will cement her place as one of the most powerful members of Congress in the history of the country. He's absolutely right. She will. I don't get it. I don't get how she does this. I don't know what kind of power. She must have dossiers in a file next to her on everyone. And every time a bill comes up or she needs to whip someone into place, she just opens up and pulls out their dossier. I'll let this go public if you don't go forward with what I'm, don't you think? It's got to be one of those House of Cards moments. That's what's going on with Nancy Pelosi. Once again, evidence out there, open and public, that we are basically, in the hands of the puppet masters. And unfortunately, it looks like the media is playing along right with that, right? Just playing along, do whatever the media says. I can't believe you haven't done more to sell it. Let's see how soon they sell it. Guys, we have Senator Marsha Blackburn coming up. I am so excited to have her on. She's going to fill us in on everything that's happening on the border. But before we get to her, born of the tragedy of 9/11, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation has been honoring America's heroes ever since. This year, the foundation is bringing 200 mortgage-free homes. Listen to this, 200 mortgage-free homes to Gold Star and fallen first responder families with young children, and to our nation's most catastrophically injured veterans and first responders. That's so important. Frank Siller connected where America was attacked on foot from the Pentagon to Shanksville to downtown Manhattan, where he retraced his brother's footsteps on 9/11. Thanks to your support, Towers of Light returned to the Pentagon and Shanksville memorials again this year. For the first time, our country recognized the people we lost to 9/11 related illness through the foundation's ceremony, and another first is planned for Veterans Day. Those who lost the war on terror are having their names read aloud. Honor our vow to never forget. Donate $11 a month to t2t.org. That's T, the number 2t.org. And here we have Senator Marsha Blackburn, and she was in Texas recently and has a lot to fill us in on. Thank you, Senator Blackburn, for being on the show. I don't know if everybody heard, but on a few other podcasts, I was so excited because I was going to be on the border with Senator Blackburn at the same time, and then we missed each other just by fate, by aircraft, by whatever happens in the world. We missed schedule. Yeah, by Schumer's schedule, we missed each other. So I'm bringing her on the show because I want to hear about what happened, Senator. I want to know what your experience was like. You and I have long been focused on the border, and you have been, headstrong and focused on finding solutions. So first, thank you for being on the show. Secondly, I look forward to hearing everything you have to say about what you experienced, because I can tell you from my experience, it's been an utter nightmare down there.
Well, it has been an utter nightmare. And Sara, as we've talked before, when I was in the state Senate in Tennessee in 99, 2000, 2001, and 2, I led the effort in my state to prohibit illegal aliens from getting valid Tennessee driver's licenses. So this is how long I've been focused on this issue. Mm-hmm. And back in 2009, 2010 were the first times I went to the border to work with the Border Patrol and ICE and to see firsthand what they were dealing with on that southern border. And that interest has continued in the work that I'm doing with the Border Patrol and the groups that are interested in securing our southern border and protecting our nation, protecting our sovereignty, has continued. And right now, as you well know, and you've done such extensive reporting on the border, things are truly out of control there. There's chaos, there is confusion. The Border Patrol union will tell you they are not allowed to do their job. And in Texas, of course, the Texas DPS, which is the Department of Public Safety, the Texas Rangers and Highway Patrol, they have moved in on the border to help secure that border. The National Guard is down there securing the border.
It's a dangerous situation at the border.
Yes.
You and I have both witnessed that. This is getting more aggressive on the part of the drug cartels and the human traffickers. Over the last few weeks, they've been actually showing their aggression by having these heavily armed men kind of staring down at our National Guard and our Department of Public Safety out here in Texas. And thankfully, there haven't been any shots fired back and forth. There hasn't been an exchange of gunfire, but there's definitely a threat of that, right? There's definitely concern that it could escalate to that.
That's right. They have fired tracers. You can hear gunshots. Some of the video that we were shooting down there, you could hear the gunshots coming from the Mexico side of that border. And as you said, yes, the cartels are much more aggressive because while they fear the rule of law in the U.S., they totally understand where they can push, but they don't want to get caught. So they will push it to a limit because they do not fear this administration. And if the Texas DPS catches them, they know they're in hot water. But they're really not worried about what the Biden administration would do to them, because they feel like the Biden administration is finishing the last leg of the journey for people that have paid the cartels to be able to come to the border. And one of the things, as I've talked to Tennesseans, until this trip to the border, Sara, there were a lot of people that would say, oh, I didn't realize everybody paid the cartel. I thought people were just coming to the border. But no,
Right.
you've got people from 150 different countries that have come to the border. Every single person that comes to that border, whether they're part of the 1.5 million that we have apprehended or part of the hundreds of thousands of gotaways that we did not, they have all paid the cartel to get to that border. And then when they get to the border, they have to pay, as you know, what is called the river tax to
Right.
get across the border, to pay that coyote that is going to take them across to the border. But see, the cartels know once they touch U.S. soil that it is the U.S. taxpayer that will be paying those benefits, those child care benefits, those health care benefits. It is the taxpayer that is going to pay for that plane ticket or that
Right.
bus ticket that will get them where they need to go in the United States. So,
Well, think about this. I'm going to go right onto that point, because not only is it hundreds of billions of dollars, I really want to preface this, because that the cartels actually benefit and the human traffickers benefit from off the transportation of human beings and narcotics.
Right.
But you're right. It becomes a taxpayer burden once the people arrive to the United States. And some of the people that we're paying for are still under servitude of the cartels, who are utilizing them either for the sale of sexual, they're sexual predators, underage, child, pedophilia. I mean, this is probably the worst of the worst that you can imagine. So not only are we paying this, like you said, Senator, we're the last leg of the smuggling operation, but we actually help assist the human traffickers and the drug cartels and everybody else once they bring the people in.
that's right. That's why the cartels are raking in billions of dollars. This is big
Right.
business. And what you're seeing, the humanitarian crisis, as you're talking about, this is modern day slavery. And these women
100%.
and girls and boys are being sold into sex trafficking rings or into human trafficking labor gangs or gangs like MS-13. Texas DPS has handled 88 different gangs all around the globe. 88 different gangs have come to that Texas border, and they have apprehended people from 88 different gangs.
That's
So
fascinating. I didn't
Yes.
even know that. That is
Right.
really remarkable. 88 different gangs
Right.
globally, right? Not just Central America, not just Mexico. We're talking all over the world, whether
That's
that's
right.
Armenia, Russia.
That's right.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and so when you look at that, the humanitarian crisis, and it moves over into the criminal operation with the cartels, with these gangs, with these individuals. You know, we have caught at the southern border this year, our Border Patrol has apprehended people that are on the terrorist watch list. They have apprehended known gang members that are coming into this country for probably no good. They are our adversaries. They are not here to get a job. They are here to sell drugs, to traffic people, to create chaos in local communities. And this is why every town's a border town and every state is a border state. And as one of
Right.
the local sheriffs that I met with said, hey, look, we get them as they're passing through, and they're coming to your community with their drugs, with disease, with whatever else, maybe weapons. You don't No, because a lot of these people, they're the gotaways. And so when
Right.
families move to one direction, the other direction is where the drug mules and those that do not want to get caught, that is where they're going.
What do you think, Senator Blackburn? What do you think is the motivating factor behind the Biden administration? I ask everyone this to continue to allow this to happen. What is the motivating factor for them? This is their crisis. I mean, they literally created this crisis. They can't even say that this just happened. It didn't just happen. They removed the policies that were in place to stop it, and they're not even abiding by the law that exist.
That's right. That is right. And they say, oh, we're compassionate because these are people that just want a better life. So we're compassionate. But it is quite the opposite, because what these individuals that are making this journey are being caused to endure, the physical, the emotional, the sexual abuse, the way these children are being used, the rent a child program that they have in place. And Sarah, you've seen it as well as I have. The child has a name and phone number in indelible ink on their arm. And after the person coming across the border gets through, they leave the child. And so then CBP has to return that child. This is just, it is, as a mom and a grandmother, this is sickening. It is heartbreaking to me what these children are being used to endure. And see, the Biden administration.
But we would never get away with that, Senator.
You're right.
They are allowing this. We would never be allowed. I could never let my child be used for a rent and then have the police deliver my child to me with the telephone number of the mom. You know, hey, Sara, your daughter, we picked her up in Mississippi. She's getting ready to go back home. And then they would drop her off. No, we would go to jail. We would literally go to jail for child endangerment, I believe. Our child would be removed from us.
And
so obviously the Biden administration doesn't really care about these kids. There can't be.
They're allowing all of this to continue by not securing that border. And then, you know, you say, well, are they trying to change the country by having individuals come across the border? They run them very quickly through a process. And you've been to that airport in Harlingen and McAllen, just like I have. And those planes are full. Every seat is full. And people have their packet. It says, I do not speak English, on a sheet of paper. Can you help me? And they're being put on the planes and they're being sent out. They've been in the U.S. maybe 12 hours, maybe a day, and they're on a packed plane. So I just think this is a very dangerous situation. And it's like in Chattanooga, we had plane loads arriving in Chattanooga and being put on buses in the middle of the night. And
well, you sounded the alarm on that. You sounded the alarm on that publicly, because without you making those statements, I don't think anybody would have known.
Well, and other communities now have started to figure this out. After someone called me and we sounded the alarm on that, then you had people from other general aviation airports saying, hey, we had the same thing happen. And you began to hear what was going on around the country and where they are moving individuals. I had a director of schools last week say, hey, you know, you don't know that you have children that are coming in. They're going to need a lot of child services. You're going to have ESL, English as the second language teachers. You may have to have an extra classroom because it is unexpected. And what the federal government is doing is transferring all of this cost from them over to your local communities and your local county governments, because they're the ones that have to pay for those human services, child services, education, healthcare.
100%, Senator. I was going to say right on that point, I remember when in California, there was such an inflow. And this is, California was the first state, I think, overall, to really feel the consistent immigration flow for a long period of time. And in the schools, it wasn't just ESL, but I remember at a school district when my oldest daughter was very young in elementary school, one of the public school districts, I went to an outdoor, it was an outdoor kind of parent teacher conference. Mm-hmm. And I remember they were handing out these headsets with translators. And I was surprised. I'd never seen anything like that. And this was years ago. And I said, well, what is this for? And they go, oh, it's kind of like the UN. It's like a translator service because 80% of the parents at this school only speak Spanish. And so we have to have a translation device. And I thought, holy cow, that's incredible. This is a public school and 80% they believe that the parents, their first language was Spanish. And so they had to have these translators. It's not just what we're facing as far as the cost as taxpayers, but it's the cost of American lives too, and lives in general. I mean, from March 2020 until March 2021, the CDC recorded over 95,000 drug overdose deaths in the United States. Of those, a good majority of which came from fentanyl, to the point where states like Ohio, other states like New Hampshire, throughout the country, and I don't know how your state is faring. I know West Virginia is having a very difficult time, but they are trying to find a way to fight back. They're calling this an epidemic within a pandemic. So we're not just dealing with COVID, we're dealing with drug cartels and the Chinese with fentanyl, literally like an irregular warfare on our country.
Well, you're right about that. And in Tennessee last week, I had the opportunity to meet with some of my local sheriffs and local elected officials, and the uptick that they have seen of heroin, meth, and fentanyl on their streets, and the number of deaths that are related to fentanyl, and this marijuana that is laced with fentanyl is something that is taking lives. And they're saying, with all this fentanyl that they are flooding the streets with, and it is all coming over the southern border, and they have never seen anything like it. And Sara, one of the things that I thought was very interesting talking to the law enforcement on this is they say the cartels are so fearless. Like I said, they understand the rule of law in this country, but they are not afraid of the Biden administration. And that's the difference. So they are now setting up distribution centers in the U.S. And I have law enforcement officers that say, we can tell you where the hub is. We can tell you what city it is in, because we know that is where some of these drugs are coming from. Now, some of these drug runners and smugglers, they're catching. And the Border Patrol told me some of these smugglers that are picking up people once they pass the interior checkpoint and moving them on into the country, they're living in government housing, they are getting government benefits, and they are they are continuing to live there and get those government-funded checks, and their side hustle is working for the cartel. And
okay, this is just blowing my mind, because I know this is happening, but I didn't even think of it in this magnitude until you said it. Yeah. I mean, I can't even imagine what it must be like. The side hustle is making the thousands of dollars, whatever they're making a month or a week, off of hustling not only narcotics, but people, and we're paying for them. We're paying for them.
Well, and we're working on legislation that would immediately terminate those benefits, because the Border Patrol said you've got to start to hit these people in the pocketbook. And this is something that our local law enforcement needs help with, and we need to force the federal government to do their job. So basically, they can still get benefits after they're released or they get busted. Yeah, while they're waiting to go to court. Yeah.
You guys, there's something so drastically wrong with what we were just what we're hearing. This is just out of control. That our Border Patrol agents, our National Guard, our law enforcement officials are taking the brunt of all of the hate, from this administration, right? We saw that with the Border Patrol agents on the border with the Haitian migrants and the guys on horseback. We see it from AOCs and from Rashida Tlaib and all of the people that support and want to stop, ICE. They basically want to just dismantle ICE, get rid of it. They want to dismantle our law enforcement, and yet yet we have somehow a loophole that's allowed smugglers and human smugglers and drug smugglers to get benefits while they're waiting for their court date. Senator, what would it be like if we didn't have you and others in Congress and in the Senate to actually make a difference? It terrifies me to think what this administration has done in 8 months and what could happen.
It's unbelievable to me. It is, it just pains my soul to see what they're doing to freedom and our liberties and what they're doing to our nation's sovereignty and what they're doing to our communities. And Sara, I think this is why the security moms are coming back in full force. They have had it with defund the police. They have had it with an open border. They've had it with gangs that are coming to their communities. They have had it with homeless being bussed into their communities from other big cities. They have had it with this happening, with CRT in the schools, with the 1619 Project, with vaccine mandates and mask mandates, with inflation that drives up the cost of groceries and gas. And they've really reached a tipping point. And I hope that they're all going to be active in helping us really get this country back on track after what the Biden administration has done in 8 months. And
is this something that other Americans can get involved in? Moms, I mean, how do they do this? How do people listening to us right now get involved and make a difference? Because that's what we want to give. We want to give people the tools. Do they just get out there and get more involved in their schools? Do they join mom groups? Do they join security for moms out there? What do they do?
One of the things that they can do is actually pay attention and do get involved with what is going on at your local city council, your county commission, your local school board. Raise their hand, volunteer to be a part of all of these programs, working on curriculum for kids, supporting all of these groups, auxiliary groups. In every single community, there's a group that supports local law enforcement and works with them. Get involved with those groups. This country is worth saving. Our nation, our freedoms, our liberties, this is worth the fight. And right now, every day, we are pushing back on evil. And what they're doing, Sara, is trying to normalize these actions of, we don't need a border, we don't need a wall, and to tell you things are compassionate when you've got this open border, and it is quite the opposite. To tell you that our history does not matter. Quite the opposite. Our history is vitally important. That our Constitution ought to be a living document. Well, quite the opposite. Our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, lays out those first principles and those foundational agreements and documents and principles on which we stand.
That's right. And I always say we have to stand on principle. We have to stand on principle. Otherwise, we stand for nothing. Otherwise, we just give it all away. That's what's going to end up happening if we don't do what you said, Senator. If we don't get actively involved, we cannot continue to ignore it. It's a tough fight. What the senator is asking each and every one of us to do is not going to be easy, but it's necessary if we are going to continue to protect this great country.
Right. And, Sara, pass things along. My newsletter, they can sign up for it at blackburn.senate.gov. Pass it to your friends where you want to give them information. Send your podcast to friends, people that are on their email list, or repost things to their Facebook pages, because this is how you fight back. The mainstream media is not going to help us fight back on that. We know that for sure. But people
That's
want
the point.
the facts, they want data, they want to see action. And as hard as we are working every single day, then, that word doesn't get out. And that is true whether it's dealing with economic issues, whether it's dealing with technology issues, or whether it's dealing with the border issues, because as you know, the Border Patrol will tell you this issue with the border, it is fixable. And that's their word. This is fixable. And there are things that can be done.
But they don't want to do it, and that's the Biden administration.
Yeah.
So we need to get involved. We need to make them care. We need to get them to understand that we are paying attention to this, and we got to hold them accountable, whether that's at the ballot box come 2022, because I'm hoping and praying we take it back. We take it all back in 2022, and then in 2024, we take it back again. Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you so much for being on the show. I really look forward to going to the border with you, though, actually. I really want to plan a trip with you, because I think there's nothing more important right now than that crisis that's brewing at the border.
That is true. And Sara, I will tell you, people at the border will say, let us enforce the rule of law, get down here and build the wall. We need that wall. Remain in Mexico back in place. Keep Title 42 so that those that are sick do not move forward into the country. And then we've got a couple of pieces of legislation we're working on dealing with those benefits, providing transparency to communities where they're going to move these individuals that have come into the country illegally, so that your local elected officials know what is actually taking place.
I'm so grateful you brought that up before we wrap this up, because those are step-by-step plans of how you can fix the border problem. It's just that simple. Don't let the Biden administration lie to you. The fix is right there. It's been sitting right there the whole time.
Yes.
Don't let them tell you it's unfixable, because it is. It is fixable. They just don't want you to know that. They like it this way. Hold them accountable. Thank you so much, Senator. I'm glad you brought that up. That was really important.
Good to be with you.
There were some things that Senator Blackburn said to me that actually caught my attention, because there's stuff that I haven't been focused on. And I know that you probably learned a lot from that. Just the fact that we are paying smugglers, giving them like benefits while they're awaiting their court date. That just blew my mind. That blew my mind. I'm going to look into that a little bit more. Look, I'm glad she has a bill that's going to try to stop that. But before I get to, all the details of what the border, and by the way, I want to talk a little bit about election fraud and what President Trump recently said. I want to tell you about UCB Gold. That's Universal Coin and Bullion. I know why our founding fathers wanted America's currency backed by gold and silver, guys, because after receiving my genuine gold and silver products from UCB Gold, I realized the importance of having something tangible that I can actually hold in my hand. UCB's president, Mike Fulgens, is a leader in the precious metals industry and was honored by his peers as the 2021 Dealer of the Year. He even showed me how gold has risen over 500% over the last 21 years, while the Dow and S&P have only increased about 200%. That's a huge, huge difference. I also learned that Universal Coin and Bullion typically has lower bullion prices than their competitors. They provide free, award-winning educational materials to their clients, and they make it so easy to buy gold. I trust UCB, and you should too. That's why I will get more gold and silver from Universal Coin and Bullion. Give them a call at 1-800-UCB-GOLD. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD, and tell them Sara sent you. Or check out their website at universalcoin.com/Sara. That's 1-800-UCB-GOLD. Okay, I don't think there's any more that we can say to show that the border is a huge national security and human catastrophe, crisis catastrophe, right? And why the Biden administration is choosing to ignore it and let it happen, I think we all know the answer to that. It's obvious. They wanted this. This didn't come out of nowhere. They actually created it. And now they're trying to pretend like, oh, we're going to do everything we can to stop it while they are releasing people into the United States, right? And while they are violating the very laws established to protect us. I mean, President Biden's only job as commander in chief is to protect the national security of this country. That is his most important job. And he is failing miserably at it. Failing. So we got to take Senator Blackburn's advice. We need to get involved. I tell you this all the time. We all have to be involved in our communities. We all have to let our lawmakers know that we find this unacceptable and that we are not going to do this. I also want to talk a little bit about President Trump. And he made some remarks that, I mean, are, he always does. He gets you thinking. He gets you thinking about what is going to happen. But it's a little scary to think about the upcoming elections. I tell you all the time, 2022, 2024, we need to use that. We need to get out there as a democracy, as a republic, and we need to vote. We need to utilize our God-given, our constitutional rights to get out there as individuals and put our vote in. Our votes still matter. But there has been a big debate since the last election. Was there fraud? Was there election fraud? Anybody who brings it up is like immediately ostracized by whatever, by social media, by the left, by people who don't want to hear it. I believe anything that appears to be voter fraud has to absolutely be investigated. But I also believe, as members of our society, a democracy, a republic, the United States of America, that we do not give up our voting rights, that we vote now more than ever, and that we make that count, Because, President Donald Trump was basically saying, hey, look, we are not going to have Republicans go out there and vote. If the Republican Party does not back election voter fraud claims and investigations into that, then the Republican Party is shot, because that's what he's saying, because Republicans will not vote. Well, I certainly hope that is not the case. I certainly hope that is not true. We have to get out there and vote no matter what. We have to make our voices heard no matter what. There is nothing more that the Democrats want than the left, than to see Republicans cower away from the voting booth, walk away from their right. Look, a lot of my family, a lot of your family, so many Americans since the founding of this country have given up their lives. For what? For that Constitution, for this democracy, for a right to vote, for this republic, for this nation. That is so important. We cannot give that up. We cannot act like, oh, because we didn't get it this way, we're just going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We're not going to do that. We are going to find a way together to ensure the integrity of our votes, but we are still going to vote. And we should go in droves. There shouldn't be one eligible voter left in this country that cannot make it to a voting booth. We should all be voting, no matter who you are. You shouldn't just walk away, because then what right do you have to complain? You don't vote? Well, whatever. I'm going to just throw that away, throw away my vote. That is a very special privilege. That is something that we all should do. It's hard because, I love President Trump. I think he made some amazing decisions as president. I want him back. My gosh, look at what's going on under the Biden administration. It's crazy. We need something completely drastically different, but we have to vote. We have to vote. We have to vote. This is what President Trump said in a statement that he emailed to supporters on Wednesday. If we don't solve the presidential election fraud of 2020, which we have thoroughly and conclusively documented, Republicans will not be voting in 22 or 24. I don't know if he was just making that statement because nobody's paying attention to real concerns about voter fraud. But I'm telling you, as a Republican, I'm going to vote. I am going to vote, and I am going to ensure that I'm paying attention to what's happening at the voting booth. And I pray for integrity, and I pray for our nation. And I'm going to hold our lawmakers accountable, because our lawmakers and everybody else, even just down to our election officials at the local level, we all have to be involved. And I'm not saying we need to ignore what happened in 2020. Very much so. We need to pay attention to what happened in 2020. And we need to pay attention to that, and we need to ensure that it won't happen again. But we have to be responsible. The GOP needs to be responsible. The Republican Party needs to be responsible. And by the way, each of us as individuals needs to take responsibility for everything that happened. Once we do that, we can solve a crisis. We can solve a problem. We can move forward. And that's what's important here. So that's my opinion. I'm sticking to it. Thank you so much for being a part of the Sara Carter Show. It's been great being with you again, talking with you. I'll be at the border again this week. I will be posting on Instagram, Twitter, and I will be on Sean's show on Fox News. Don't forget, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's where I go. Sean Hannity show, as well as other shows like Steve Hilton. Again, remember, this is our country. It's up to us to take it back. It's up to us to stick together. Thank you again. Don't forget to download the podcast and go to saraacarter.com for links to all of my social media. At the Sara Carter Show, we're taking the story back. Thank you. God bless you, and God bless America. Frank Ziller, I am so happy to actually meet you. Tunnel to Towers is a foundation that I am so proud being a sponsor for the Sara Carter Show. So thank you so much. You know, when I read the spots, I'm looking at the stories of how the foundation started. I'm so moved. What was it that made you realize, we've got to do something? We've got to give something back.
Well, my brother 20 years ago on September 11, 2001, when he gave his life up while saving others, New York City firefighter that runs through a tunnel, the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel, with 60 pounds of gear on his back, gets through that tunnel, goes up West Street into that South Tower and goes up those stairs. And along with 343 firefighters, 60 police officers, and so many others, he gives up his life. We needed to make sure that that sacrifice and that story was not forgotten. So that's why we decided to do the foundation. He was the youngest of 7. We raised him. My parents died by the time he was 10 years old. So he has an unbelievable story of how he recovered from his own losses. And he realized that every day in life was precious, and he lived it that way. So he died the way he lived, serving others.
T2T.org. That's T2T.org. It's only $11 a month. It's up to every single one of us to do our part to help those that were willing to give everything to protect us and our families.